and welcome to Farm Journal Live. I'm editor Clinton Griffiths from our studios in northern Indiana as we bring you the very latest on what's happening around the world in regards to the coronavirus and its impacts on agriculture as we continue to try to make it here midweek through another week, this first week of May. Let's get to some headlines. As states around the country begin to reopen, gasoline demand once again on the rise. The latest report from the Energy Information Administration showing gasoline demand roughly 20% off its recent lows. However, it's still more than 30% below a year ago. Analysts say pump prices may have bottomed for now and are on their way higher. Some of the bigger states like California now starting to somewhat lift those stay-at-home orders. A surge in ag imports leaving the U.S. ag industry with a trade deficit in March just as the world shut down from COVID-19. U.S. ag exports in March totaling $11.9 billion. That's up 5% from the previous month and the strongest pace since November of last year. However, a flood of ag imports worth $12.4 billion hit U.S. shores in March. The 17% jump set a new record and was only the second time ever that imports topped $12 billion in a month. That pushed the trade deficit for the month to $502 million. USDA will update its outlook for U.S. agricultural exports later this month. And even as the nation's packers work to reopen and stay open, state attorneys general are asking the Justice Department to investigate some of that potential price manipulation in those big beef processors. In a letter to U.S. Attorney General William Barr, the state AG said the heavy consolidation means beef processors are, quote, well positioned to coordinate their behavior and create a bottleneck in the cattle industry to the detriment of ranchers and consumers alike. This echoes many other similar calls for an investigation on other corners of the beef industry and a proposal that would fund placing feedlot cattle on a maintenance diet for 75 days now being circulated through Washington, D.C. The 7-page proposal called the Fed Cattle Set-Aside Program would seek to alleviate the risk of massive economic collapse in the beef cattle industry. It was developed by the Beef Alliance and modeled after a set-aside program used in Canada following the BSE crisis in 2004. Now, that proposed payment rate for cattle in the set-aside program would be fixed at $2.90 per head per day, and it's intended to offset additional feed and operating costs incurred by holding cattle back from slaughter for 75 days. Let's bring in Pro Farmers Washington correspondent Jim Wiesemeyer and Drovers editor Greg Henderson to talk about this. Now, Jim, this has been circulated. How is it being received there in Washington?
Well, it's almost too early to give a final assessment because they're calling it a concept paper, even though the title, when you get it, says final. It just got to the House and Senate Ag Committees just a few days ago. A lot of people are not commenting on whether they agree or disagree with it. I will tell you the key barometer will supposedly come later this week. We want to see what the National Cattlemen's Beef Association has to say about this proposal.
Greg, as we look at some of the details associated with this, walk through that and whether or not it could have an impact there for cattle producers the way that it's supposed to.
Sure. So yes, it obviously could have a huge impact. We are backing up 150,000 to 200,000 cattle every week. Another thing to keep in mind is that we're entering the time of year, seasonality, when we see the largest supplies of cattle ready to go to slaughter. All of this at a time when our slaughter capacity has been reduced by about 40%. So this backlog is occurring. It's going to get bigger unless we do something. Putting these cattle on a 75-day maintenance diet to hold them and allow them to go to slaughter in a more orderly fashion for the capacity we have could do a lot to stabilize the markets. Once the proposal is once the cattle enter this 75-day plan, they would have to remain there for the full 75 days. So it's to help create a more orderly process of cattle heading to the plants. As far as the price goes, this morning the Fed Cattle Exchange sold only 15% of the 5,000 cattle offered. 95 cents was the price. So we're in a dire situation in the cattle industry.
And I just want folks that are watching at home to know that they can submit some questions. We're going to give that a shot today with our two experts on our panel. Jim, as we talk about the livestock industry, obviously we've had the executive order, we've had the push to keep packers open. We're still seeing shortages. So the question is, how involved is Washington going to get beyond what they've done already?
Well, you're going to see additional assistance to the livestock industry, especially cattle and hogs, and perhaps dairy, into the coming phase 4, our CARES 2 package that we'll get either later this month or sometime in June. And that could be some of the areas that are not adequately represented right now, say within the cattle, complex. This set-aside program would probably need, legislative authority for it. So that would be another topic, that could be moved into the next package.
Greg, as we talk about the cattle complex and all of the moving pieces here, we know our friends over at Sterling Profit Tracker have said they're going to have to stop running that right now because the algorithms don't really work. We've adjusted so many pieces to try to maintain and work through this coronavirus situation that he really felt he couldn't come up with an accurate number as far as margins go.
Yeah. What we know that packer costs have gone up. Obviously, they've got labor shortages. They've had to make equipment changes at the plants. What we don't know is exactly what does that add to their cost, and certainly they're not sending cattle through there as fast as they were previously. So any profit tracker that would be calculated under an old formula would be obviously obsolete, if you will. Now, obviously, we know that packers are making pretty good money on the cattle.
Yeah,
that they're sending through now.
Right, and we look at that cutout value continues to climb, up above $400 yesterday. Do we have any new numbers for today?
I have not looked this morning. I know it was above $420 yesterday. That's obviously spiked crazy numbers. My guess is it's going to come down almost as rapidly when things get fixed. The question is, when does the packing industry start being able to process cattle and hogs anywhere close to what they were before? And what this is showing us is that the demand from the retailers who want to put beef and pork in front of their customers, they're having a hard time of doing that.
Yeah. Jim, as we talk about some of the other things, we know the help that USDA was planning, and they have sent that to the Office of Management and Budget. Fill us in there. Do we have any more details of what that may look like as far as payments go, not just for livestock, but for some of the other crops involved?
Well, the rule has not leaked yet. I'm trying hard, let me tell you. It got over there yesterday morning. OMB, Office Management and Budget, has been working with USDA ever since this program was announced. So hopefully by the end of the week, if not very early next week, we'll have the official release of this rule. That's where we'll know the per head and other eligibility requirements of this that I know cattle, hog, and dairy and crop producers. What are going to be the stipulations? But I will add on the meat complex now. The next move I think is going to be led by consumers, because when you cannot find or having a hard time finding bone-in meat, at least in the East Coast, we start screaming. I think a number of lawmakers and others are going to try to push continued assistance in the logistics morass that we currently see, and hopefully that'll clear up in a few months.
Yeah, and it is a complicated issue. As we open this floor up for some questions, if folks have them, we've got our two experts here. Please feel free to write us in a question. I'm monitoring those as we go through here. But Greg, we've seen Wendy's now even struggling to find fresh ground beef to make hamburger patties in a significant number of stores. This looks like it is going to be the norm as we kind of try to work and keep these facilities up and running.
Absolutely. Wendy's. The issue with Wendy's is that they are promoting fresh beef and instead of frozen patties to their fast food franchises. So the fresh beef is a problem, and that's hurt their supply, obviously. And Wendy's is probably one of the first that's going to be affected by this as we move forward. Ground beef, there's more processing into ground beef right now than in other products in the past because the demand is so high. We need to remember that before the coronavirus, somewhere around 60% of all the beef eaten in America was in ground beef or hamburgers. So the demand is very high.
Yeah.
Jim, as we start to look at the impacts of this coronavirus on the food supply chain, do we expect any broad sweeping changes from Washington on the way that our food is supplied in the entire step in this process? Are we going to see more management and oversight of that, do you think?
We better, because you don't want to go through this again. And now we finally have the focus on the middlemen, if you will, the so important complex to make the ag sector work. And so we're going to have to put in checks and balances, for the future. This is a mini farm bill, as we're seeing right now. And, Colin Peterson, House Ag Committee Chairman, has said that this next coming aid package will be like reopening the farm bill. And we're going to have to look at all processes, including the safety for the workers at the meat packing plant. It can be done if you have a vision for it.
Yeah, Jim, what else is next? Do we know when the House may get together and start working on some of this? We've heard the Senate is back, maybe back in Washington, but the House is not there yet. Any ideas?
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Democrat from California, will call the House members back just as soon as she feels she's got all the concessions she can wrangle out of President Trump, and that's when she'll call them back.
How is this going to play out across the election, Jim? I know that's a big question, right? As we try to work forward, we've got, 6 months, 7 months here before we have an election?
Yeah, too soon right now. But how this plays out in the next few months is going to be critical to whether or not President Trump gets reelected. As he has indicated, some of the decisions he has made and will be making are the hardest in his whole tenure in his life, if you will. And we're going to see if the U.S. economy can come back within any degree between now and, I'd say, minds are made up before the election takes place. So I think we have to get that economy, if you're a Trump supporter, really going by the October timeframe.
Yeah, and Greg, how serious is the situation for our feeders and for our cow-calf producers right now as we try to start May and work our way past calving season into, kind of when we're going to be turning cattle out on grass?
Clinton, the crisis in the cattle industry cannot be overstated. I know we've seen a lot in the hog producing industry. It's been in the headlines, but cattle is next. Cattle are next in terms of ramifications. The good thing about the cattle industry that we can put these cattle on a maintenance diet and slow them down a little bit, but feed yards are losing money hand over fist. We need to remember that this set-aside program is only a proposal at this point, and it needs to have the support of all of the cattle industry and support from congressmen if it's to move forward, or some alternative plan. So if you're a cow-calf producer, you're asking yourself, what does this have in it for me? Well, if the feed yards go bankrupt, then the price of your feeder cattle and calves are going to go to zero, or could go much lower. Let's put it that way. So we need a dynamic and profitable feeding industry, and maybe this is a step in that direction.
Yeah, we do know reworking those feedlots to do it ourselves at home is a big challenge. Thank you both for being here. Obviously, we've got some more details to be worked out, but we'll continue to keep folks up to date on what's happening and how that's moving forward. I want to thank all of you for joining us for Farm Journal Live today. Again, if you'd like to continue and follow along in our coverage, you can go to agweb.com/coronavirus for the very latest on this outbreak and the impact of the ag industry, and of course, agweb.com for the very latest of what's happening in the agricultural industry. Thanks so much for watching today. Everybody stay safe. We'll see you again.
This season, rather than madness, opening days, or taking a break, the world is frozen, silenced by quarantines, isolated by distance, and edging on panic. But while work for you may have changed, out here, we're still going strong. Our season is underway. The crops will get planted, the livestock will be fed, and your food will continue to be grown. Just like it's been for generations. There's plenty to worry about, But out here, social distancing is our specialty. American agriculture farms on, today and tomorrow, for our family and yours.